Adults know what slavery really involved. It involved rape. It involved torture. It involved taking a baby from their mother. How is it that anyone could suggest that in the midst of these atrocities, that there was any benefit to being subjected to this level of dehumanization?
That was Kamala Harris, the country's first black vice president, in Jacksonville, Florida today, saying something that should not be up for debate. The vice president's speech comes as Florida faces backlash over new standards for teaching black history in public schools. Those standards require middle schoolers to learn that enslaved people, quote, developed skills that personally benefited them. The State Department of Education has responded to criticism with a statement that reads, in part, the intent of this particular benchmark clarification is to show that some slaves developed highly specialized trades from which they benefited. That statement lists 16 people who allegedly benefited from their enslavement, but at least 6 of those people were never enslaved. It specifically names Ned Cobb, and while the Department of Education is not specific about which Ned Cobb they have listed, history books across the country teach about a Ned Cobb who was born in Alabama in 1885, the son of an enslaved man. The skill he learned was farming, and he used that skill to escape the financial binds of sharecropping, if you can call that a personal benefit. Joining us now, Trymaine Lee, MSNBC correspondent and Into America podcast host. Trymaine, thank you for making time for us tonight.
Thanks so much, Jonathan.
So today we heard the country's first black vice president come out and say slavery is wrong. What do you make of the necessity of that statement in the year 2023?
Jonathan, perhaps the saddest part is that it actually has to be stated in 2023. Whether you're talking about 1923 or 2023, there has been this battle over this narrative that slavery simply wasn't that bad, right? That black people have been complaining and there was a war fought over it, and it wasn't that bad. There were some good slave owners, that there was an acceptable degree of rape, an acceptable degree of human trafficking. And we call it slavery, and we've seen these pictures and read these stories about this, the genteel South and the plantation and merry Negroes playing their violins. But in fact, these were forced labor camps where people were systematically raped, separated from their children. But the fact of the matter is that that narrative still pervades. And there's a huge faction of this country that does not want to not just accept the history of this country, because accepting the history means you have to accept and respect the experiences that black people have experienced in this country, but also they have to take a look in the mirror and see the horrors and violence heaped upon black people by white society.
Right, and that's really hard for a lot of folks. You know, Trymaine, we Googled the names that Florida's Department of Education holds up as examples of people who benefited from slavery. One of them seems to refer to George Washington's sister. 6 of them were never enslaved. What do you make of that?
Well, really, it doesn't matter who these people are. They're stand-ins. And I think one telling moment was there was a spokesman for Governor Ron DeSantis who tweeted in response to VP Harris's speech, who said her mother is Indian. Her father is of Jamaican descent, who they say admitted that they also descend from a slave owner. And they pointed to that to say she wasn't descended from enslaved, the complete opposite, as if millions of people in this country have not been are not descendants of people who were inseminated through rape by white slave masters, right? And so it doesn't matter. The facts don't matter. The names don't matter. The fact is that they want to be able to use folks as a target to dehumanize and illegitimize the experience of black people in this country. And at least the most cynical view on this is that they're doing this purely for political gain, because they know there's a huge segment of voters in this country who are cheering this stuff on, because that means they look at the entitlements, and they look at the welfare state, and they look at black folks, they look at affirmative action, and they look at folks having to feel, quote unquote, guilty about the role that their ancestors played in this country. And so, again, the facts really don't matter. But isn't that, perfect in this broad culture war that folks are in about the truth, that they'll use lies and misinformation to kind of propel their side? It fits perfectly.
Yeah, and Tremaine, one more question for you. Earlier this year, you went to Florida and spoke to people who are trying to educate students on Black history outside of the classroom. What are they saying about the changes to Florida's curriculum?
You know, one thing that I kind of expected, but to hear it from generations of families who say they feel actually attacked. Folks, especially from the South, who've grown up hearing the stories about so much of the violence and all of the barriers set up between Black people who descended from enslaved people to finally get a taste of freedom and try to build communities and educate their children, to have those stories wiped away, it felt personal to a lot of people. And so they say, like, you know, as so many of us have heard time and again, that no one is going to save us but us. And so for the group of folks that led by Professor Marvin Dunn, who going through these Teach the Truth tours, taking people actually in the footsteps of history so that history will never be lost, John.